On today's show, Laura Heywood interviews
Thomas Schumacher, president of Disney Theatricals. This one is incredibly special, and in honor of The Lion King now in movie theaters, I've brought it out of the archives. Back in November of 2017, I sat down with one of entertainment's most influential figures, the president of Disney Theatricals, Thomas Schumacher. We became fast friends as we dug into his long history with the Walt Disney Company, including his ushering in a new era in theater with the groundbreaking staging of The Lion King on Broadway. The occasion was the 20th anniversary of the stage production, and again, this was back in 2017, and it was also one of the first interviews, if not the first, in which he discussed the casting and plans for the new film. Of course, The Lion King reboot is in movie theaters now, and you can still see the only truly live-action Lion King at the new Amsterdam Theatre in New York City and on stages all over the world. Please enjoy this deep cut from the archives of Laura Heywood Interviews. So thrilled to be here with Thomas Schumacher to talk about The Lion King.
Which one?
The Lion King.
The Lion King.
Did you want me to say it in one of the other 8 languages that the Broadway show has been translated into? No, I can't. I can say El Rey León.
El Rey León, sí.
What are the others?
Oh, the Koenig and the Kungen and the thing and the thing. And yeah, it's really hard.
This is the most successful entertainment property of all time, The Lion King on Broadway.
That's what they say. Although I read in a very popular New York newspaper that that's what we say, but I always say that's what they say.
Well,
I never say it. I say that's what they say.
Yes, well, I said it, so now I can be they.
I'm going to quote you now.
Please do. Thomas Schumacher, you are the president of Disney Theatricals.
Yeah.
And you also are a producer. You've worked on the animated film side, but now you're doing stage full-time for Disney. Is that correct?
Yes, I grew up as a theater kid outside of San Francisco, California. That's all I ever wanted to do is make theater. But curiously, back in the 1980s,
yes.
I got a call to produce an animated movie for Disney. So I took a brief sojourn, worked on about 21 of the movies that I'm suspecting your audience grew up with. And then we were able to create this Disney theatrical thing.
So that's such a nice, clean narrative. But how does one go about just getting a call to make a movie for Disney?
See, the fact of the matter was nobody wanted to work there.
At Disney?
No, because this is pre-Roger Rabbit, pre-Little Mermaid. Animation was the backwater of the entertainment industry. And nobody wanted the job. I got a call saying, will you come here and produce it? I think I'm the first outsider to come into Disney to produce an animated movie. And then it just kept happening.
I want to pick up right there, but before we do,
have
yes, we have a little, I was going to say elephant in the room, but perhaps we should say evil lion in the room, evil lion uncle in the room. Would you talk to us about what's happening behind you on the stage?
Stephen Carlisle, who plays Scar on Broadway, you can see him 8 times a week, actually doesn't look like Scar in real life.
I don't know that eyebrow.
So every night, Elizabeth here, who's worked on the shows from the very, 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 very beginning, gets him ready. And it takes how long, Elizabeth? 45 minutes. Boy, we have to keep talking for a long time.
I bet you have a lot of stories.
But Stephen actually did the original UK tour.
Oh, excellent.
So he's been in the hinterlands because he's actually British.
I know. He told me he's the first Brit to play Scar on Broadway.
Well, that would be true. Actually,
I would hope so if he's telling me that.
I curiously, which may be completely inappropriate for your show, so we'll go there. But I was accused of being homophobic, which is ironic for me. But I was accused of being homophobic the way we portrayed Scar in the movie. And everyone kept saying Scar was a gay character, and why was the gay character the villain? I said, he's not gay, he's British.
There's a song in Legally Blonde, the musical, that says, is he gay or European?
Yeah. But the Brit villain thing, they just come off that way.
So Scar is a heterosexual lion?
Well, yes. I mean, not in a totally binary way. I mean,
this is totally not where I thought this interview was going to go. But I mean, you did bring up his sexuality.
Yes.
So we are going to be checking in with Stephen and Elizabeth throughout the interview.
As we go.
I want to go back to your roots in animation. Actually, before that, you thought you were going to be an actor, right?
Well, I grew up acting. I had a little theater company for the city of San Mateo, right across the bay from where you grew up in Oakland. And I went to UCLA to be a theater major, thinking I would act and direct. And there's this wonderful thing that happens if you're lucky. I did summer stock it's like summer season of acting. And I realized that to be able to read well out loud doesn't mean you can be an actor. Many people learn this way too late.
After they've already been working as an actor for a while.
Or not working while they're trying to
Yes.
work as an actor. I fortunately stopped acting at the end of my junior year of college and went back to school for the last year of college and went to my mentor, a man named John Cobble, and I said, he taught the producing program at UCLA where I went to school, and I said I want to be a producer, and I began to study that, and this is what happened.
It was junior year when you did Pippin?
Yes, at the end of my junior year, which is funny because I'm very close friends with Stephen Schwartz, who created Pippin. And I've often been able, we've done a couple of movies together and stage shows and things, and I've said, don't make me sing Corner of the Sky. And then that's how I get my way. But yeah, I did in repertory, I did Pippin, Renfield, the guy who eats flies in Dracula, and Corporal Hamilton Steves, the Marine, in South Pacific.
Wow.
In repertory.
So, wow, so you were doing all of those on like rotating nights?
Uh-huh.
So you really got your fill of being an actor.
Yeah,
And-
and unfortunately, it wasn't so much I got my fill, the audience got their
No.
fill. And so then I segued.
I heard a quote from you that you said you could maybe be a mediocre actor, but you would rather be an extraordinary producer?
Well, at least something I knew I could aspire to being great at something, but I would never be able to aspire to be a great actor. Because when you're in the room with great actors, and when you see what someone like Stephen can do, I could never have done that.
Well, you have
enough.
certainly taken your art form and where you entered Disney with, according to you, that nobody wanted to work there.
No, seriously,
So that was
nobody wanted to do it.
1988 you started working for
Yeah,
Disney?
well, actually in December of 87, although we always say 88, it's cleaner.
Okay, got it. So 88, we'll say, because it's cleaner. And then you started with Rescuers Down Under and 21 films.
Yeah, well,
Can you name them chronologically?
No, I only can name the good ones. I forgot the bad ones.
Oh, so that sounds like a smart way
They
to
haven't probably
view
forgotten the bad ones, but remember the good ones because everyone else takes credit for them. You forget the bad ones because nobody ever mentions them. You also never get sued for plagiarism on the bad ones, which is interesting.
What is there a favorite of yours that doesn't get the accolades?
Yes, I have a handful of favorites that are never the first one people mention. I'm absolutely crazy about a movie called Mulan.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart, and I believe what it is about, and we worked very hard on it, and I think it's spectacular to look at. I am out of my mind in love with a film called Lilo and Stitch that just completely kills me what it has to say. And even though it was one of the most brutal creative experiences of my life, I love this movie called The Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah. Oh, you got some Emperor's New Groove
Okay,
fans.
And I can tell because if I said, why do we even have that lever? They would know what I meant.
What was brutal about the experience?
Because it wasn't the movie we set out to make. We set out to make a film, a big epic kind of Lion King scaled movie that had sort of a Prince and the Pauper element to it. And the David Spade character from Emperor's New Groove was the Emperor, and Luke Wilson played a shepherd who looked like a llama herder who looked like the Emperor, and they switched places. And the B story was David Spade out in the world with John Goodman and being pursued by Yzma, played by the remarkable Eartha Kitt. And that was the only part of the movie that was working. And so we ended up taking the B story of the movie, cutting, this is the hardest part for me, cutting Sting's songs, and then making it a broad, silly comedy rather than this big, epic, serious movie. So it's sort of like if you were working on a film of Midsummer Night's Dream, and you cut Hermia and Helena and everybody, and you just made it about the rustics, and then it would just be a big, long movie about Pyramus and Thisbe and the wall. It wouldn't make any sense, but we did that, and it was funny, so I loved it.
Well, that's good.
You look so lost.
I'm not lost. I'm thinking about whether there's a future for like a producer's cut of what got cut and the version.
The haunting thing is that there's a documentary about this movie being made.
Oh, there is, and will we get to see some of that cut stuff?
Never.
Oh, boo.
Never.
Okay, so you came into Disney. And Disney turned around and became a juggernaut. Lion King came to Broadway 20 years ago when Times Square was like not necessarily the safest place to be. Well, it was sort of like, I don't want to call it like a seedy underbelly, but Times Square used to be a very different kind of cultural place.
Yeah, but I think we get a lot of credit that we don't necessarily deserve. What did happen was our chairman, Michael Eisner at the time, had this idea with a good friend of mine named Robert Jess Roth. Rob Roth, who directed the original Beauty and the Beast. They had the idea to put Beauty and the Beast on Broadway, which sort of predates the big establishment of Disney Theatrical. And that was 1994. And Beauty opens, and to everyone's surprise, it becomes a hit. And at that moment in time, it had probably been since Annie, produced by the great Mike Nichols. When Annie came to Broadway, families began coming back to Broadway. Before that, probably it was some of the Rodgers and Hammerstein, King and I, what have you, and then families would come. So generationally, these things would happen. But it was really Beauty that turned the corner, and Michael Eisner, for the Walt Disney Company, buying the very derelict New Amsterdam Theatre on 42nd Street. And once Disney committed to restore that glorious theater, then other people said, well, we could step in too.
Yeah.
But lots of people, 42nd Street redevelopment, Cora Khan, all these people who were really heroic fighters for Times Square and for Broadway made that happen. We just, I think we're a little bit catalytic, and I think we were so visible, people give us credit. So whenever people ask me, I always say, well, look, a lot of people did this.
Sure.
It wasn't just Disney arriving.
Well, it was a Variety who published an article today that basically gave you credit for it. So I'm quoting them.
I pay a lot for that.
Is it true that when Michael Eisner said, hey, Tom, let's make Lion King a stage musical, you were like, no?
Yes, it's absolutely true. I said it was the worst idea I'd ever heard. But keep in mind, Beauty and the Beast, as the great late Howard Ashman and my dear friend Alan Menken created it, was a classic Broadway musical. It just happened to be animated. But what they did, the structure of it, the kind of music, very Broadway. Lion King is like a David Lean movie, big and epic with huge shots that happens to have some songs in it. It doesn't even use, like Can You Feel the Love Tonight, no one's lips are moving. They're not actually singing it.
Right.
Circle of Life, no one's lips are moving in the movie, right? It's music in the show.
It's like it's scored.
Yeah, I mean, Be Prepared, they sing, I Can't Wait to Be King, they sing. But for the most part, it's not really a musical. It's a film with music. And it's so cinematic. And I thought, well, if we're going to try to take that and just plop it on stage, it will be silly.
Right.
So there was an argument between me and Michael Eisner that has been anecdotalized so far that I don't think either one of us really remembers what exactly happened. I was out to dinner with him not long ago, and I said, here's how I tell this story. How do you tell it? At least trying to get a little bit square before the 20th. But anyway, but I did say it was a terrible idea, and then he said to me, well, let's do it anyway. I said, well, I won't do it like you think. He said, I don't care how you do it, just do it.
He gave you carte blanche to
he gave me carte blanche to cut me off later, in fairness. And, but I called Julie Taymor at home, it's one of those things that, people say this so much in entertainment, and people talk all the time, but it absolutely is the fact. I called Julie Taymor, and everything changed. She had never seen the movie. I don't think she'd heard of it, and this was like early 1995 when it was the biggest movie in the history of film, and she'd never heard of it.
Well, because she'd been traveling the world studying puppetry in every country.
I think she was actually directing Oedipus the Opera, starring Jesse Norman, conducted by Seiji Ozawa. There's a thing about Julie where everyone wants to talk about what a little downtown, nobody knew her artist, and she was in Tokyo directing a giant opera with Seiji Ozawa and Jesse Norman. So she knew how to work in a big scale, and she was already so established, but not in the Broadway context.
How did you know of Julie?
10 years before I called her, almost to the day. I had tried to get her to bring a production called Liberty's Taken that she'd done at a big outdoor festival here in New York to a big festival I was working on in Los Angeles. So there was this festival I was the associate director and head of programming for, where I get credit for discovering Cirque du Soleil and bringing them to America. Worked with Peter Brook on the Mahabharata, which we did. All these big important things we brought to LA in 1987, and I wanted Julie Taymor at the center of it, and I couldn't make it happen. But I did call her and get her to come to meet about The Lion King.
How did she have some freedom to change the story? Because this, I expect, may also be sort of overly anecdotalized, to use your word. But I heard that she wanted...
Is that a word, do you think?
Well, it is now.
Good.
We've both said it on a very public stage, so anecdotalized
People
certainly
are going to see this?
Yeah, people are watching it right now.
Oh, I would have
live.
been more careful.
Oh, throw caution to the wind. Julie, from what I've heard, wanted there to be this story about how Scar sold the water to Las Vegas to power their lights.
Well, here's what happened. Here's my version. In fact, she and I were just talking about this, like, which version do you tell? No, what happened is first she came out to California to meet and talk about the show. Everyone assumed she came with ideas about design, and she actually came to talk about narrative. Mm-hmm. She wanted to talk about why was the film so honoring the patriarchy when really lions don't do anything and lionesses do everything. Mm-hmm. You know, the lionesses go hunt, they kill, the lion comes out and eats it. Right? I mean, lions just lay around. You know, they only do 3 things, none of which we feature in the movie. They kill, mm-hmm. they eat, they sleep. Well, there's 4.
Yes.
Yeah. And anyway, so we talked a lot about that, how the narrative could work. Her first big entry point was the music. How could we bring in what my dear friend and such an important collaborator on Lion King, Lebo M, did, mm-hmm. right? He's the guy everyone grew up with singing the chant at the opening, and he wrote all the choral music and all the lyrics of all that stuff in the film, and then wrote a lot of the material for the Broadway show. She wanted to figure out how to do that. And then we talked about design a little bit, but not much. And she had this big idea that since the movie is structured in 3 acts and a stage show is structured in 2 acts, that the second act could kind of clear up what happened when Simba went away with Timon and Pumbaa. Mm-hmm. What actually happened?
Because in the film, it's just like...
They walk across a bridge.
Yeah, he's a cub, and then he's not a cub.
He grows a mane, and then he's all sad, mm-hmm. and then he hits a bunch of leaves that do not spell sex in the sky. And then it's like Rafiki goes, oh, he's alive. And then the whole thing goes. So what the heck happened in the longer stage version? And she came up with this idea that in this sort of, not really Las Vegas, but this idea of a kind of Vegas-y, you know, Fantasia, nightclubby world, that he could end up there, and that's where he reconnects with Nala. And that would be highly theatrical. And it was a great idea for being highly theatrical to fill the stage show out. But it isn't our story.
I see some visuals in it, though. Like, I actually wrote in my notes that when they do I Just Can't Wait to Be King, there are these, I mean, huge sort of extra cartoonish, and it reminded me, I wrote in my notebook, Fantasia, because it reminds me of those dancing hippos.
Well, because in the movie, Chris Sanders, the brilliant art director of that scene, that sequence of King, wanted it to be a fantasy, and she went with that, which is why we have those tricksters and stuff. But actually, this idea of this sort of this one concept she had for the second act of the show, although we didn't do it narratively, everything you see on the stage was informed by it. This idea that people would be half animal, half human. Oh, and everyone knows this shot from this moment in the stage show that's in every, I say shot because it's in every montage. From stage right comes this cheetah, but you see a glorious woman controlling with her head to wires, her hands, and it moves so beautifully. Well, that idea actually is an extension of her original stage show idea. So even though we didn't do the story idea, what she conceived for that fully informs the show, including what Stephen's getting into right now.
I'm glad that you took it back to Stephen.
I thought about it.
Well, I think it's a perfect, I mean, he really has already transformed from when we last checked in
This is really what happens if you don't wear sunscreen. Sun damage, really, kids can do a lot of damage. Anyway.
So he's getting his sort of sideburns, his eyebrows. I love an eyebrow can do so much to convey an evil.
Well,
I
what's
think.
fun about this,
And look how it's shaped the same as on the mask.
see, it's like she knew they'd be together.
Yeah, it's almost like it was designed
What's
that
really
way.
fun is that the character of Scar that your audience grew up with in the movie was
The one
designed.
that's not gay.
Hey, they're cutting that out earlier.
No, it's live. I'm telling you,
Oh,
people are
great.
watching right now.
I think I cleared that up.
You did.
No, it was designed by a brilliant animator named Andreas Deja, and he created the whole look of Scar, the design of Scar, and then animated it. And that idea that the scar goes through the eyebrow thing, and that the shape of the face and the idea of it. And so really when you look at this, and in fact, I just introduced this summer at Julie for the first time in 20 odd years to Andreas. They met for the first time, even though
wow.
she's a giant fan of his art and he's a giant fan of what she did, but they'd never actually met. But they've both lived with this character. And so what in this mask that you'll see later, which Julie sculpted completely, she sculpted it, it was cast and turned into this very lightweight carbon fiber thing, but she cast it in clay, comes from what Andreas's drawing is. So when you actually look at a drawing of Scar, it absolutely is echoed in what Julie did. It's not a whole separate thing.
It's the animal-human hybrids, to me, are what makes The Lion King, from a visual standpoint, so different than anything that it had ever been on Broadway before, or really has ever been since.
Well, I think half of it is this intuitive thing that Julie just has about how to represent human animal stories. She's done some of that. That sort of, you can look at even on going back to King Stag and these things that Julie had done, you see a definite Taymor style. And this idea that things are half human and half animal came out of her bigger idea we talked about earlier. But also, Lion King is an allegory. It's not a story about animals at all. It's a human story. It's a story about everyone in this room and everyone who's watching.
There are people who think it's the Nelson Mandela story.
People will, it owes a lot to the true biography of what happened in South Africa. It owes a great deal to Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. Almost every mythic story, epic story, biblical story, you see a hint of it. The irony is, the one story everyone compares it to, which is Hamlet, we never talked about during the making of it. It's the one thing that everyone says, oh, they just did Hamlet with lions. Really? But the fact is, his father was killed by his uncle. His father comes back to him as a ghost, and he's inspired to go forward. So it sure is coincidental it's a lot like Hamlet, but we didn't actually say, let's go make Hamlet.
Well, there's some quote about how there are only 3 stories that just keep getting retold, but this one is
we did 21 movies with those 3 stories.
Well, right, certainly.
Over and over
we have
and over
plenty
again.
of room for those stories to be told in all sorts of different ways. Speaking of South Africa, it was very important to Julie, and I imagine to you, that from the very start, there was a large contingent of South African actors represented on the stage.
Yeah, but it almost didn't happen. As I mentioned earlier, Lebo M was introduced to us by Hans Zimmer, who did the score for the movie and won an Oscar for it, and of course is terribly famous and a lovely guy. We wanted Hans because we had heard a soundtrack to a film he had made called Power of One, and about a kid in boxing in South Africa. And on the soundtrack of the movie, there was this beautiful African choir and this sound, and that was Lebo. And so we asked Hans, who did that, can we get him? Hans couldn't find him. Hans was recording the demo of Circle of Life, and by a total fluke, Lebo came to visit. And Lebo was just kind of hanging around LA. He reconnected with Lebo, and so Lebo wrote that chant, the Nansangonya, and all that choral vocal in that, and just did it on the demo with a demo singer named Carmen Twilly. And everyone in America who grew up with it, and in England, heard that. And then every single language, 32 of them that it was translated into around the world, the movie, no matter where you saw it, you always heard Lebo as the sun came up. And so what he infused the film with, Julie wanted more of. Hans and Mark Mancina, a third composer on the show, created this album, Rhythm of the Pride Lands, music inspired by the film, cut from the film, and just some other stuff. And that's really what became the juice of it. Now you needed South Africans to sing it. And the power of the South African choral style was what first influenced it. We just wanted it to sound like that. And don't forget, this was also during when Paul Simon was working with Ladysmith Black Mambazo
Graceland album.
and Graceland. And then we realized it wasn't just the sound. And I think so often we say the sound of South Africa, but it is the spirit and the soul of South Africa. And that's what happened when these glorious South African company members joined us in the original cast. And we got a special dispensation from Actors Equity to have them. But they said, you will have to replace them. You can't keep them.
Meaning you'd have to replace them with American actors
because we're
union
very restrictive
representation.
in America about who gets to perform on our stages. It seems a little kooky anyway. But we had to do a great deal of petitioning, and there was a great deal of activity within our community so that we could always keep a contingent of South Africans. So it's 6 South Africans in the Broadway show, but sometimes, like in Hamburg, we can have 14, 15, up to 20 different members from South Africa, and they often rotate around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Times just did an incredible piece looking at six or so individuals who have had their lives changed by being
some people
involved
have
in
jumped
the
from
making.
company to company. People like Lindy Wade Dlamini, who is in the show tonight, has been doing it since we went into rehearsal for the original production. She's played the show the whole time. And I always like to point out she wears her original beaded corset from 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't wear a single corset I have from 20 years ago.
Me neither. There are a lot of corsets in the show. Just looking over at Scar's costume, he's got sort of a corset-shaped body piece.
Part of it gives you, part of it helps create that silhouette that can say animal as you push parts up and things come out. But that's Julie. She designed these costumes. She sculpted and designed all these masks, these extraordinary visuals. Julie drove so much of everything on the show, but the visual imprint of the show is really Julie Taymor.
She really understands the anatomy, not only of the human body, but of every individual animal. And I was in one of those situations where I had very good seats when I went on Sunday, but I still wished I'd brought my binoculars.
Good seats?
Yes, I got some good seats to prepare for the interview. I wanted to be up close, but I still wished I'd brought my binoculars so that I could see all the details.
Well, the detail is extraordinary. When you see all the hand beating, all the hand painting. Part of it is I think the audience intuitively responds to the handmade nature of the show. Mm-hmm. And yes, one could try to cookie cutter it, but the simplicity, when you actually look at what Julie did, what Richard Hudson, who did the scenic design, what Michael Ward, who designed this makeup that Elizabeth is doing, what everyone did was to try to make the show feel handcrafted, that you could feel the hand of the artist there at all times. And I think if it felt vacuum formed, if it felt plastic, if it felt simple and easy and shiny, it might be satisfying as fashion for one hot minute. Mm-hmm. But I think the artistry of it wouldn't live in the same way.
It really still feels so fresh, and I think that is key. It's like haute couture fashion, I don't go to this going, oh yeah, this is a good show for 20 years ago. I look at it and I go, wow, this is such an incredible piece of art.
I think part of that is in the nature of its timelessness. So just for a minute, go with me on this.
Okay, I'll go with
If you imagine the Restoration, so we're like in 1650, 1660, and by 1660, 1670 in England, we started having Restoration spectaculars, flying angels and all that sort of thing. That at the time, by the way, they said we're ruining Restoration plays. These big spectacles were going to kill the Restoration, which is kind of funny. But anyway, that everything in The Lion King, minus Don Holder's brilliant lighting, everything else on that stage could have been done in 1660. And in fact, the wildebeest stampede, one of the things that seduced Julie into doing it was I want to do a stampede on stage. But if you actually think about how that is done, that could have been stagehands cranking away. You could have made that happen.
Yeah,
the technology of the show is actually something that could have been done with stage machinery from hundreds of years ago. And I think that basic timelessness, that things feel like they are painted, it feels like it has always existed, I think that somehow makes it last.
I'm curious about elements of the show that have changed over the last 20 years. I know that around the 10th anniversary, you took made a few little cuts. There's at least one song on the cast recording that's no longer in the show. I'm curious about whether any of the technology that works the stage, there's all sorts of like rakes that exist in a certain point. That's when the stage is sort of slanted, and then it'll be flat again. And there's sort of turntable elements. Has any of that been automated or technology updated that we don't see?
Well, I'll demonstrate one when we finish, because because
Oh, great.
Stephen actually has one of the technological changes, which seems so minor, but it's actually big on his costume. But and costumes are much, much lighter than they were originally. But the big change was at the 10th anniversary, we made some cuts to the show. And as probably anybody who's watching this who follows Broadway knows, you go out of town, you work on your show, you come back, you make changes, you get it ready for Broadway. The way we had scheduled the show, because we didn't know anything, was we actually left ourselves no time to do that. And the show was so difficult to actually mount the first time. Today, you look at it and go, well, it's The Lion King. It just, of course, it's there. But when we did it, every night, and if you ask the original cast, was a mad scramble. And our original crew, who are so great, all of them I still know, it was a mad scramble every night just to get the show to happen. So the level of, does that song work? Should we take it out? All those things we know of songs lost in Boston, as we say on Broadway. We never did that.
You didn't do any out of town?
We did the out of town. All it was how to get the show on its feet.
Right. Actually, you spoke of the Stampede scene. I read an interview with Julie where she said that they actually had to stop the show.
We stopped every night for 2 weeks.
To put the pieces of the stage together.
We couldn't
like an extra intermission?
Well, we called it a pause. And I and my producing partner, Peter Schneider, would go on stage and say, we're going to have a pause. Stay in your seat. Did you
like make a pun about PAWS, like pause? No?
I'm so filled with regret now that we didn't do that. It became a shtick, though. Every night we'd give this speech about you're going to have to pause. And we actually wrote a scene. Roger Allers and Irene Mecchi, who did the book, wrote a scene to cover that, which actually is one of my favorite scenes in the show, where you learn that Mufasa and Zazu have known each other for a very long time. It's a sweet crossover scene that is so dear. It was only written to cover a scene.
Is this the one where Zazu goes, it looks like a shower curtain from IKEA?
No, that's at the end of I Can't Wait to Be King.
That's like the one reference to the fact that this is actually a play. He looks up at the curtains.
Well, in Minneapolis, Jeff Hoyle, the original Zazu, had a lot of moments to fill sometimes because things were running slow. So he would improvise, and we kept a few of those. I think it was a shower curtain from Dayton's, which was the big department store.
So that's one of those little modern updates.
Yeah, that we do. But we, you're asking about the changes in general.
Yes.
So we didn't have any time to change out of town. So we did a few things back in New York, but 10 years later, we cut the song Morning Report for a couple of reasons. One, the show was running long. Today's audience wants, well, first off, the happiest words in a program are 90 minutes, no intermission now. Everyone's like, I have other things to do. And the show was too long. It was verging on, Rodgers and Hammerstein territory. And you forget how long shows used to be. So the show was too long. And there were things that were no longer as fresh or powerful as they were when we did it. So we cut a section of I Can't Wait to Be. We cut a section of Can You Feel the Love Tonight, a section of Madness of King Scar, a bit of Chow Down, and we took a whole song out. And it made the show run about 12 minutes faster, which particularly on the road. People in New York, they're smaller theaters. On the road, when you have 3,000 people, the intermissions are longer. Everything it gets longer because how long it takes to get people in and out of the theater. So it just makes it feel tighter, and I feel great about it.
I also noticed you snuck in a little sneak peek of another musical that Disney Theatricals is bringing to New York.
It isn't intended to be the commercial it's become, but this is this bit. You all know it. It's when we cut back in the movie to Zazu and Scar, and
who's looking quite evil over there, by the way.
Good.
Ooh, yikes!
See, he knows how to work it. No, and Zazu is singing "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen," and Scar says, "Oh, Zazu, do sing something with a little bounce in it." And in the movie, he sings "It's a Small World After All," and which my dear friend Richard Sherman, who wrote that song, always says to me, because he also wrote Mary Poppins, says, "Why did you make fun of me?" But so we did that.
Because it's the one song that gets stuck in everybody's head.
Yeah, it's
quintessential Disney.
Yeah, over time on Broadway, it has been Small World, Be Our Guest, Supercalifragilistic, and now it is in fact Let It Go from Frozen.
Which is coming to Broadway.
So then when he sings it, Scar says,
sing something with a little more bounce in it.
Right, and then he sings Frozen. Then he sings Frozen.
Anything but that.
Right.
Which is what you're all feeling. So
I don't think so. I want to just transition for a couple minutes and talk about the fact that Frozen is coming to the Broadway stage.
I should get busy on that.
Tickets are already on sale, and from what I understand, have like largely sold out. I actually bought tickets for my whole family to see it 1 year and 3 days from today. That's how far
Really?
November 18th, we're seeing it of 2019 or 2018.
Did you get good seats?
I think they're balcony seats. Like we just jumped on it as soon as we could, and that's what we got. Like, this is a hot ticket.
What's crazy,
or a cold ticket.
Frozen, it's a cold ticket.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I corrected myself.
Pause. I get it.
I like words.
But no, seriously, when we put Lion King on sale, these many years ago, keep in mind there was no internet. Right? There was no way to communicate to people, buy your tickets online.
Yeah.
In fact, it was all, we did a mailing, and to get you to buy Lion King tickets, we offered a free watch with every order of more than 4 tickets.
I wonder
These little black kind of swatch-like watches with the Lion King logo.
That's got to be a major collector's item now.
Yeah. Well, if you can find one that's working, that would be a collector's item. But so we had to give away a watch to sell a ticket because nobody wanted to come. And then, but today, because you can go online, you can see so much, and because you can buy tickets online, because you can go to Ticketmaster and you can buy your tickets for Frozen, but you can, people just buy a lot of tickets to Frozen. And then just the universe of ticket sales today. One thing that we've been committed to, and I know it sounds crazy, in fact, people watching this, people in the room will go, well, I saw, and they'll mention some crazy price for a Frozen ticket.
Right.
Which is not the price we're charging for a Frozen ticket. So we're selling tickets at a regular Broadway price, but what will happen for a brief period of time is the marketplace will drive those tickets up, and then they'll probably come back down, and it'll all be fine. But today, everything becomes an auction. Everything becomes an auction, and there's so many avenues for you to buy tickets. But there's a lot of tickets in the marketplace right now.
Well, we bought ours from the box office,
and we've sold a lot of tickets.
Yeah, that's great. You have 2 of my favorite actresses playing the leads, Patty Murin and Casey Levy. They're
Casey Levy and Patty Murin.
Yes,
they are so delicious. And you just want to hug them. And the great thing about them is they're playing these sisters. And they are so kind and so lovely to each other. They're great company leaders, and they're fantastic with the little girls who play the younger versions of themselves. The company is really, really lovely. You've seen their pictures. It's a gorgeous company. It doesn't look like Norway necessarily. It looks like a Disney Broadway show. And I love them all. They're really fun. And a lot of them have been in a number of our shows. So James Brown III, who, among other things, plays the King. And this is his 3rd show with us. He was in Lion King. He was in Little Mermaid, and now this. Bobby Creighton, who plays Wesselton, not
one of my
Weaselton.
favorites.
Bobby was Timon in 3 different productions of Lion King. Bobby was in the original Little Mermaid. He was even in our first readings of Aladdin, and then now this.
Wow. Can we just stop for a second and talk about what's happening over here? It looks like Elizabeth's gotten some powder all over our beautiful actor.
It always looks like they're ruining the makeup at
this
point.
It almost does.
No, what they have to do is put translucent powder on it. Otherwise, it'll get shiny, and B, he will sweat it off.
Oh.
Do you use a
because it's
fix-it
water-based
as well?
makeup.
It's grease paint, so if we don't powder it, it'll just
smudge, and
it doesn't stay until you powder it. Yeah, so that's why we're doing this.
I just noticed he has like these blobs of blood in the corners of his eyes.
No, that's actually from the long week.
That's just Stephen. Wow, it's so neat to see this stuff up close. I should mention, too, that in the lobby of The Lion King on Broadway, a lot of the costumes and pieces that are no longer, I guess they've been swapped out, are available for people to visit and see up close.
And there's
like
actually
this.
a Madame Tussauds figure in the lobby, and it alternates between Scar and Rafiki, and you can actually come and get your picture taken there.
Ooh, I want to talk about Rafiki, my favorite character in the show. Rafiki is a baboon, but also sort of a witch doctor / narrator / there's one of the quotes in the New York Times piece about the South African actors. One of the actresses playing Rafiki had to take leave because she was feeling spiritual angst because
it's one of the most interesting transitions from the movie. If you remember Rafiki in the movie, who is in the movie for less than 10 minutes, it's about 800 feet of animation. The character of Rafiki in the movie was originally going to be sort of a Henry Kissinger-esque advisor to Mufasa. And we cast the now just recently passed Robert Guillaume to play this. And Bob was a really elegant man from the musical theater, and we didn't know whether the character would ultimately have to sing. And he was from the musical theater, and at the time, Bob was playing the Phantom in Los Angeles, which, if you think about it, just speaks to Andrew Lloyd Webber breaking ground at a time when people don't remember that an African-American man was playing, because this would have been 1991-ish.
Yeah.
Bob Guillaume, at the time very famous in America for playing Benson on television, so he was cast for that. And then Roger Allers, who wrote the book with Irene Mecchi for the stage show, was the co-director of the movie. And he said, why are we not playing Rafiki, once the story got going, with a little more kind of a quirkier character? And he used Zakes Mokai, a great South African actor, as an example. And actually then Bob, the interpretation you see in the movie is based on that. Then Julie spoke to an actress named Tuli Dumakude about this character, and they talked about the Sangoma, the spiritual woman, the healer in a tribal woman from South Africa.
Right.
And that's where this idea that Rafiki could be a Sangoma, the fact that Rafiki is a woman, the fact that Rafiki is the narrator of our show, that she is the one who is singing Circle of Life, which now people just sort of accept, but at the time, it was a surprising idea. And then she weaves us all the way through the story. And my favorite thing about her is she sings Circle of Life, which you can't usually hear because there's so much screaming over all the animals coming down the aisle.
But she's also supposed to be a monkey, right? Like there are a couple of references in this.
Yes, and she is a baboon.
Yeah.
But it's a baboon. It's like a Sangoma playing a baboon, right? You don't actually ever think Mufasa's a lion. He's a king playing a lion. There's a dual thing happening all the time. But her entrance, Rafiki's real entrance, is when she tells what we call the click story. So in Koza, she does this whole story. She tells you the story of the Lion King in the scene. So her introduction is entirely in a language no one in the room speaks.
But she is to actually
and everyone
telling
she's telling you a story.
Are you worried that she's ever like throwing in little like dirty phrases or like code, like if she's like has a friend in the audience who does speak it, that she's going to be like, I see you out there, or like, I mean, if nobody speaks it, then how do you know she's actually telling the story?
Well, a lot of people
that's
speak
what I'm asking.
it, just most of us hear don't.
Right, yeah.
But among the things I worry about on The Lion King,
that's not it.
I have never found myself worrying about the integrity of one of our
Yeah,
Rafikis.
that's fair enough.
We have Rafikis who speak so many languages. We have when I was with Julie in Shanghai 2 years ago, mounting the show in Mandarin, that woman had played Rafiki in Brazil and Portuguese. She'd played it in London. She'd been in the US on it, and now she had learned the thing in Mandarin.
Wow.
So she would speak the 5 languages Rafiki speaks plus Mandarin, right?
We've got some changes happening back here.
It's happening. Okay, so John and Teresa are now going to be getting Stephen into his rig.
Look at that. It looks like something from a spacecraft. Yes,
so you're seeing an armature up there, which is the mask is going to be attached to. But first he has to get dressed. This is what they put on you when you're having messy soup or playing.
It sort of looks like a straitjacket or something.
How heavy is the whole...
50 pounds.
The whole rig is 50 pounds?
Here, I'll come stand over here.
What do you have on your hips?
Well, these are the controls for the mask. So you've got the battery packs and controls for the finger control that I'm going to have on my fingers any minute now.
Those fingers look like, they're sharp. They're claws.
In the olden days, the controls used to be connected with wires to my finger control, but actually now it's they're spoken to each other with wireless networks.
So that's actually, we'll show in a minute once he gets his chaps on.
Yeah, I can really tell up close like this. You're right.
Go ahead and feel them. It's leather.
May I feel you? Yeah, it looks like it could have been woven together. I mean, it's sewn, but it looks like it could have worked in a very similar way pre-technology. Beautifully done.
What was it like to put it on the first time?
It was heavy. I was surprised how heavy it was, and how much you couldn't really move very well in, because this is it's hard. When it's brand new leather, it's really, really hard. So, and the way I play the part, it's quite physical. And I'm down on the floor and getting up and down. So it was it took a few shows to work in the leather until I could do what I wanted to do.
There's a song in Dear Evan Hansen about breaking in leather. So I'll point you towards.
I think it actually just gives you a sense of what women have been putting up with for centuries.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
As you claim your great distress of having to wear something stiff and awkward, really you just need to see what Anna Lee and Owens did when she went to meet the King of Siam. And she wore that every day.
Are you going to be traveling straight to work in this? You don't have to take this off and do it again, right?
No, I think we'll just stay in this. Get in the car.
The handy thing is the R train goes right from outside your studio.
Can you imagine?
Straight? Wouldn't that be great? Just get on the R train.
Can we please do that and live stream it to get people's reactions, like a walking billboard?
I wish we'd thought about this ahead of time. Although at rush hour, nobody would be impressed because it's New York, right? They would simply be irritated and say, "Watch the backpack." The great bane of the subway, the backpack. But yeah, the tail would probably be the biggest problem.
Wow. Should I stay over here so we can keep checking
in?
Yeah. Or?
Well, yeah, they're just going to keep working on him. Is the costume here any different than the one you wore in London?
It's pretty similar. If you want to talk about the controls.
Actually, let's wait till they're out of the way, because I want the head on you when you do it, because you're going to swing it around.
Okay, let me ask you. I'll come back over here.
John, and that would be bad.
Tom.
Changed, sorry. What I love about getting changed is, we've got all these people like Elizabeth and John and Teresa, and we know exactly what each other's doing. Nobody has to say, lift her arm now. We just know any moment what we're doing. If I lift my feet, she's down on the floor, and it's wonderful. Love that.
A well-oiled line-making machine.
You have to wear it for the whole show, which is an interesting thing, because we change time periods in the show. Mufasa, of course, spoiler alert, he dies.
No.
So Mufasa leaves and comes back as the apparition. So L. Stephen Taylor, who plays that, does that live, but he comes back. Simba changes. Nala changes.
What are you putting onto your hand right there?
This is the control.
Yeah. Hold on. Yeah. Wait.
Oh, sorry. I jumped ahead.
Okay, wiggle it around and show her how dull it is to watch it go without a mask on it. Are you plugged in? Yeah. Now it's frankly just vulgar. Yeah. So you see why I tried to keep you away from that.
I kind of like it.
Go down so you can... Yeah. Now we're going to... See, watch this transformation. It's all going to come together.
Oh my gosh.
Are you going?
I can't tell whether, he's sort of like that sexy bad boy thing going on. He's scary, but also kind of cute.
Are you driving?
Yeah, I think we might just need another controller.
Oh, no. You keep one in your pocket?
Yeah, I think.
No, I'm just making sure everything's okay.
She feels about during the show.
Too obvious.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to start doing my lipstick like that, with one lip.
The line around it?
No, just the one lip going up like that, the evil look. How long ago did you play Scar for the first time?
For the first time, it was about 5 years ago when I played it on tour in the UK. And I did it for about 2 years. And then I had 3 years off. And then Thomas asked if I'd like to come over for the 20th anniversary on Broadway.
And what do you understand about Scar now that you didn't understand 5 years ago?
Oh, just how bad he is. I thought he was bad, but he's worse. He's really bad.
He's a bad guy. But,
but
still sort of lovable.
But you get different laughs here than you probably got in...
It's really responsive here, actually, on Broadway. They laugh a lot, they listen, they really get it.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Just kidding. Also, one thing we have not yet talked about is the fact that Lion King is going to be a live-action film.
Yes.
It was just announced.
Yes, Jon Favreau is directing a live-action movie in which there's actually no live action.
I was going to ask you about that. So is it going to be computer-generated?
You're getting really a backstage view of... Okay.
This can happen sometimes.
Now, are you swapping right now? I already did. Is it working? Are you wiggling? It's kind of exciting that you've lost control of your head. Aren't you excited? Because this had gone smoothly. You wouldn't have a dinner party anecdote. No, seriously, is it not working?
It seems to not be working. It happens occasionally, and then you have the whole puppet department come down, run down. They sort of give you different things. They wiggle certain things, and then it works again. Oh, we're wiggling.
Do you feel it? Do you feel it happening?
I can feel it wiggling. Yeah.
Do you feel it?
A little to the left, Teresa. Yeah.
I was going to do a Can You Feel the Mask tonight, but it's so obvious, really. Yeah. Are you there?
Oops.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Teresa.
Oh, come on. How is that?
Oh, that felt wonderful. So this is, this is how we move about.
Wow.
And it took a long time to figure this out. John Vickran, puppet head, it just makes getting in and out of the costume easier. Because again, as I said, he starts in the second scene, and he appears throughout the show. So he's in costume all night. Other people can kind of... How much do you take off? What is your longest break?
I have about 15 minutes in Act 2.
15 in Act 2?
15 in Act 2, where the whole thing comes off and then gets put back on with a harness.
Yes, for the fall.
Yeah, for the fall.
You can't see through that mask, right? So when it's in front of your face, are you just using your peripheral vision?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just looking around, and I know where the eyes are, so I know where I need to be looking, which I think is about there. Yeah, I can see around.
Do you feel like this is a costume? Do you feel like you're a puppeteer? Does it feel like...
Yeah, that's so funny, because I just feel like everything. Like I'm a man, I'm an actor, but you use everything to tell the story. I use the eyes and the hair, these claws. Everything helps you to make the character work. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I sometimes think about this like in the way you would think of, say, Fred Astaire, where his ability to both control his body, but then to appear with a hat rack, to make a cane do something. When you think about how those extraordinary performers were able to make a prop, a thing come to life, and what you see when Stephen does this is that's just carbon. Taken from a clay model carved by Julie Taymor. And, Michael Curry, who helped create all these puppets and all these masks and everything, did all this design work. But ultimately, it's just another tool for an actor.
It is really, truly remarkable. It's cool on stage. It's even cooler up close. Have an amazing show tonight. Thanks for spending this time with us.
Do you need help down the stairs?
Just watch out. Nobody step on that tail. Woo.
Did you want to do questions now?
Yes, let's take a couple of questions from the audience. Wait, actually, first, I want to ask, have you ever, just for funsies, had yourself made up in any of this character makeup?
No, because it just seems like a pretentious thing to do.
Does it? You're not like, it's Halloween. I'm going to a party. Make me Zazu today.
I did once, however, wear the Simba mask at a big costume ball.
Let's go to the audience for some questions.
Hi. Were any of the actors or the voice actors from the live-action movie involved with the play? Or
Whoopi Goldberg comes a lot. Whoopi Goldberg, who played Shenzi, the female hyena in the movie, has actually not only been to the show a bunch, but she's actually been in the show. So
Did she do Rafiki?
Well, one night she played Rafiki, Shenzi, and a bird lady in the opening. And we just told the audience we had a special guest that night. And then she came down the house right aisle as one of the bird ladies with her arms out in the pretty white dress with the birds on her arms and with her little glasses. And then she came across the stage, and because she enters on stage left, house right, and then she crosses stage right, and the whole audience began to scream. And then she did a Rafiki scene, but she did the Shenzi scene as a hyena, but she has to be on these crazy arm puppets, and she couldn't get off the stage. She was great. She's a good sport, and she's been fun, so she's around it a lot. In terms of the movie, John Favreau, who's a genius, who directed that beautiful Jungle Book Disney made a few years ago, with all this amazing CG, is the one who's creating the movie. I've been out to meet with John a few times, and I've been to the studio and seen it, and what they're doing is glorious. It is. What excites me about it is it completely honors what the original movie was. The technique he's using is breathtaking.
Is it a CG situation like Jungle Book was?
It's trained lions.
No.
That's what it looks like.
I bet it looks like that. But you said there's actually no live action in it.
There's no I don't know what they call it live action, but it's its own curious form. But I did go onto the set with it and put on a VR headset and go into the elephant graveyard and have Simba and Nala walk by me. And it was unbelievable. It's thrilling. I've watched a fair bit of Circle of Life. And what Jon Favreau is doing with this movie is bringing it to, with the movie, I've been working on this show, Lion King movie and show for 27 years. So I've seen it in every version, every language, everything. And the versions that I wasn't part of, like theme park shows and parades and stuff. But I have to say what Jon is doing is such a tribute to what Rob Minkoff and Roger Allers and everyone who made the movie were doing originally, what we set out to do. And I genuinely think that the audience, when they see it, are going to be so excited, because you will imagine the power that opening sequence had when you were a kid. But now as adults who grew up with it, it will feel as surprising to you and your heart will race in the way it did then. So I'm excited about it.
I understand if you can't answer this, but I want to ask it anyway.
I'll just lie, maybe.
Great. If you need to lie about it, fine. We'll just call it fiction. The actors, there's so many recognizable actors who were announced to be in this cast. Are they doing any of that stuff where they put little dots on their faces? Will we know that that's Beyonce? We'll be like, Nala looks like Beyonce.
The difference between this and that form of animation is these are portrayed to really look like animals. Mm-hmm. So what Jon may or may not do with his animators to create your impression of the character, whatever he does, he'll do, and you'll see what you see. But the idea is that they really feel credible.
Will there be nods to the Taymor aesthetic in the film?
It has nothing to do with the stage show at all. It's
right.
It's purely
what I tell people is there's been a live action Lion King for 20 years and you can see it in New York City.
Or anywhere in the world.
Or anywhere in the world, yeah. But I'm just thrilled that
was a long answer to your very short question.
I'm thrilled
that the Lion King
dinner
party? Horrible.
I'm inviting you to all the dinner parties. You can just keep the conversation going. You have been involved in so many incredible projects that I think, were the backdrop to so many of our lives, more than we may ever really be aware of. I'm thrilled that you continue to push the boundaries of what art can be on stage. The Lion King is celebrating 20 years, and I expect will be on Broadway for 20, 40, 60, 200 more years. We'll see.
Well, I won't.
Well, your legacy will. I'm excited about Frozen. I know that there are other projects in the works, and we'll have you back to talk about those. Thomas Schumacher, thank you so much for spending the evening with us.
Thank you so much.
I would never use that.
Never try that home remedy.